Thank you for joining us for the Dawn debate this morning. We only have 10 days to go before we get to the general election, and we still have court cases coming up. Let me start with you, Evans. Your feeling on now, the IG basically deploying the military to areas that are thought to be hotspots.
I think as it's actually in order for the country to prepare itself to have a peaceful election, and that includes deployment of security forces. But the manner in which that these security forces are being deployed is what I think is in contestation. And I think it's proper for the IG to be very clear in terms of not to have monopoly of the security itself, but also to have a situation whereby the stakeholders, which are the Wananchi themselves, can be involved to understand the way. I know we are not going to talk about, we're not going to interfere with the formation of the security forces in terms of deployment, but we have a lot of other people working in communities in terms of security, just to understand what is the exact role of the security forces in the election. Because we don't want a situation, or people don't want to anticipate a situation, because what they're doing is they're already preempting violence, that there might be violence.
But isn't that the work of intelligence to, well, do their homework and find out if there are areas that are potential, then ensure that those areas are secure?
The problem is that what is happening is that they might also go towards intimidating voters, because when you see a place has already been identified as a possible potential place where there will be violence, what happens to the voters there? Then the voters there think that maybe it's not safe for them to be there. So many of them will prepare either to vacate the area, because I think that's where the problem is. I think, because we know this country is not lacking security in terms of, if you go almost everywhere, there's security. I think there's even police posts, and they're all the security is all over in this country. But the way you want to deploy or beef up security in areas in terms of trying to intimidate even voters by deploying security, I think is what is in contestation. We're not saying that the police should not guarantee people security during the election, but then it should be done actually in a manner. And I think the IEBC also has a role in this. I think the IEBC should also be able to guide the police force in terms of how they need to be properly deploy and participate in this election. Because this is a very different situation. This is an election.
Okay, Siongo, let me hear from you, because I mean, one would imagine that it is within the jurisdiction of the police and the military to ensure that we're secure. And let's face it, during the election period, there is a possibility of things going out of hand. So really, having those extra hands on the ground and feet on the ground is not a bad thing.
Thank you, Mike. Perhaps I'll start off by saying that we have determined for ourselves as a country that elections are a national security issue. I think this came out of 2007. Now, having said that and moving forward, there are some constitutional questions that come to play. There is nothing wrong whatsoever with the security forces being deployed around the country to beef up security. But when it comes to the military, that raises eyebrows, principally because the military is there to defend the country's borders and not to carry out civilian management of discord and dispute. Now, going beyond that, we have critical issues which need to be addressed in anything called security management. Even before you send the boys in blue and the big guns out there, we should be, first of all, in the clear front line of this entire discourse should be the NCIC, the National Cohesion and Integration Commission. They should be the ones who should be out there preaching peace, talking to communities. And yes, we have a very strong National Intelligence Service. That information should be being shared with the NCIC, so that Mzee Kaparo and his group should be out there talking to those communities where they feel that they have information that there might be violence, to diffuse it before it starts. Sending in people with big guns and big machines only increases tension. It doesn't diffuse it. And on that basis, then you'd want to ask, well, how would the IG be commanding military forces? It's not possible. This is basically a principal function of the executive, which rests to the head of state. So these are the questions that are being raised, but not just by NASA, but by the local communities. And like Bwana Afula is saying, we don't want to intimidate the local communities. And no one wants to feel intimidated in their home areas.
Okay.
People want to come out and vote.
All right, well, Fuller, let's look at it from the other side. If things didn't go as planned and violence did break out, and wouldn't we be sitting here again and criticizing the police and the security forces that they slept on the job? They were caught flat-footed. We don't have privy to the information that they have. We don't know what would possibly be the reasons, or maybe we don't know fully. Let me say we don't know fully. There are some that we may know, but not fully why they would be deploying military in some areas or security in some areas. Wouldn't we be sitting here again and saying that they were caught flat-footed?
I think I'm really trying to avoid to anticipate a situation whereby we will need the military out there. I know belating of the military in a civilian election is also something we really need to critically examine. I think we've seen in many regimes where the military has been called out of barracks, is in a situation where it's actually almost like sort of a takeover. So we don't want to say that's the case, but I think I don't really want to anticipate that the military have a role in this election. When it comes to the police, I think the police have a role in this election because even in terms of their training, in terms of their deployment, I don't think the military is properly trained to be deployed in a civilian situation. And it will really be so unfair to the military to be deployed in a situation where it's actually, like a civilian election. Because we know we are used to policemen and their tactics in terms of dealing with where the sort of violence we have. But I think it's not, this election, I think it's not proper for the military. And I don't anticipate that people will actually, we're not seeing the possibility of this violence. But looking at the places where they have been earmarked as places that with possible violence, I think it's also very unfair to look at the report that was released by Caparo identifying other areas. For example, look at these are strongholds for particular parties, like for ODM strongholds, where you expect, of course, the people there to celebrate whatever result will come from there. You will not expect them to cause violence because of the result that is going to come there, because I don't see, it's really confusing to see that there's a clear program to deploy the military, to deploy the security in areas which are perceived to be strongholds of a particular...
Okay. Let me come to Siongo, and you're vying for Member of Parliament of Langata. Indeed. So you're a politician who's basically involved in getting the masses together to tell them what plan you have for them. Right. Do you feel like our leaders are preaching enough peace, as it were? Because really, at the end of the day, it is the leaders who would antagonize and possibly have people fighting, apart from the fact that, of course, justice must be realized. And if there is justice, chances of peace not being there then become minimal.
Very true. I'll start by saying that, and perhaps as usual, I want to put some humor in your morning. We were expecting a presidential debate the other day. We ended up witnessing a State of the Nation address by an incoming president. And the Right Honourable Prime Minister Raila Odinga took the opportunity, which is very rare, as an opposition leader, to assure Kenyans of peace and a clear and transparent process. This should have been the position of Uhuru Kenyatta, but it was done by the opposition leader. I don't think you could get any more of a peaceful overture than that. I think that was very mature. That showed his elderly statesmanship, and that should calm down any tensions on both sides. I don't think anyone wants bloodshed in this country, not Jubilee, neither does NASA, where I belong. However, when you map out opposition strongholds as possible hot points and you deploy massive amounts of security services there, it points towards trying to contain a situation, whereas if you're not happy, we're ready to handle you. But how would you know they're not going to be happy if the election is going to be free and fair? And so there's no problem in deploying security. First of all, it shouldn't be the military. We have enough boys in blue. We have the APs. We have the general service units. And between that and the intelligence, we should be able to deploy security throughout the country. I want to assume that this country has gone way beyond what people think it was in 2007. The Kenyan voter is mature. The stakes are high. Yes, that is true. But we also have a very strong international and regional community which is looking over the process. Now, all that we need to do to have a peaceful election is to ensure that the IEBC does not determine the results, but conveys the will of the Kenyan people. And that's all that everyone is asking for, nothing more.
Wafula, do you feel like our politicians have handled their podiums well enough to ensure that we have peace in this country? Because at the end of the day, yes, without justice, there definitely would be a chance there could be people who are dissatisfied, and that could end up anyway. But they also have a responsibility as politicians when they stand up on the podium to ensure that they preach peace.
I think for the last couple of weeks, I think they are really trying to ensure that they use the podium to preach peace and to ensure that this election is free and fair, and also maybe peaceful. But what I've seen is that there's a lot of rhetoric in terms of you see people going to their backyards and using language that maybe cannot be understood by other people and trying to pass messages that are not very clear. I think that is something where I think politicians are also missing the point. Because when we're in these campaigns, I think it's important that you speak to everybody. You speak to everybody across the board, not to be seen or to be perceived to be speaking to a certain group of people. And that is also, and I think the the Kaparo Commission really needs, they really need to come out and see the kind of messages that are being relayed by these politicians. Because I've heard some of them that where they could speak this language in a public forum, change the tone when they're speaking to a certain community. And I think those are the same messages that maybe we don't know what that we interpret. But in overall is, I think, as my colleague here said, is that I think politicians are trying their best, and we want to see a peaceful election. I think the problem was about, and I think the police, this deployment we are seeing of the security can also be a threat and a risk to the election. They shouldn't actually look at it that we are deploying because we will ensure there will be peace. The manner in which they are deploying these security agencies might also be a threat to the entire electoral process. So the electoral process is not only the role of the IEBC in terms of registering and ensuring that people cast their ballot, but the way the military, the police want to do, I think they must be also very careful not to interfere with the election. Because if anything happens, probably at the end of the day, the buck will stop with them.
All right. Yeah. Siongo, the NCIC was put in place, and is there really, especially for times like this when there could be an eruption or people who use hate speech or divisive language, do you think they've been effective in their work so far?
Well, I think, with all due respect, the NCIC has tried their level best. They've preferred certain individuals who are in public life to be charged in court. I don't know under what conditions there have been certain pardons in the past. Some of the things that this country needs is an example. We've all been naughty students before, but I think sometimes the teacher picks out one of the naughtiest and gives a harsh punishment.
And becomes an example to the rest.
To the rest. Okay. And honestly speaking, when you have people running around talking about we don't just use machetes to cut grass and so forth. Those are very primitive statements. This country is way past that. But let me just finish off by saying this. Mike, I don't have enough money to keep my family in London and ban Kenya at the same time. Very few politicians in this country do. We all want to raise our children here, both the politicians and the people in the private sector. I don't foresee myself raising my children and my family in any other country for the next 50, 60 years. I plan to be married here. I hope my children get married here. So if we look at this contest called an election as a means to developing this country and proffering leadership, that is exactly what it should be and nothing more. This is not an ethnic competition. There should be no marshalling of ethnic groups to despise one another, because as soon as August 9th comes and we have the election result, we'll continue being neighbors. And
we still have a country to live in. Wafula, as we're winding up, this morning our interactive question is basically where we are asking people what their message of peace to Kenya is, and I'll give you the opportunity to do that as well. What would your message to Kenyans be regarding peace?
I think this is August 8th is the day that all Kenyans have been waiting for. And I think those people who have actually registered to vote, I think should feel free to exercise their constitutional right to vote. The elections come and elections go. The country is bigger than any one of us. And I think it's important that after we cast our ballots, we wait the results, whatever outcome will be, everybody needs to celebrate, because the most important thing is for you to participate in actually exercising your constitutional right. Many people have not had the right to vote. And I even heard in many countries, even like in the United States, many people only could celebrate the fact that they have voted, not actually
exercise your constitutional right.
Not even caring who wins, but the fact that you can be able to exercise your right to vote is very important. And I think once everybody does do that, then I think, as we've all said, is that our country need to stand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Siongo, your message?
Well, principally first to go to the people of Langata. I would like to say that we are going into a period where you have to choose a leader, as is deemed by the Constitution, one who has the ethos and the morality to drive the constituency forward. But to Kenyans, we are going to carry out a historical event on the 8th of August, and it has no parallel whatsoever to do with an ethnic competition. This is simply a competition of ideas. If you feel disenfranchised by the way the government runs the country today, you can change that by voting. If you feel overjoyed by the way the country is being run today, you can exercise that by voting. But no other means, no other endeavor will be able to change governance in this country apart from the vote. So we must come out to vote, come out in masses and make the right choice, not just for this country, but also for Langata. And I'm sure you'll be voting Musari Siong on that date.
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us on the Dawn Debate this morning. And that's where we wind up the Dawn Debate. And a quick reminder of our question this morning, our interactive question, is to do with peace. What is your message to Kenya for peace? And I just want to read one or two comments that have come through and see what we have to say. We have Tobias Okinyi, who says, it's about the people, victory versus the gluttons. For peace is bounty referee must not fail. So, of course, IEBC has a huge responsibility to ensuring that we have a peaceful election by ensuring that things are done in a fair and just manner. Edwin Adanje says, oh no, let me move on to another one where they say, we will win the election together. Left there will be peace.